On Valentine's Day of last year, in the dumbest video I've ever made so far, where I guessed which Smash Bros. Ultimate character has smashed, I made this claim.
Well, know this, but Ike is actually canonically gay.
Some people were surprised by this and disagreed, so I figured it's time to take a closer look, considering not that many people have actually played Ike's games, for reasons. That was one attack? But before we get started, I think it's important to say a character is defined by much more than just their sexual orientation. Ike is a great character because of his actions in his games, regardless of who he may or may not want to dance the horizontal tango with. Happy Pride Month. Yeah, the video's late. Are you surprised? Or even a little bit surprised? You know what channel this is? Come on. Yeah, sex is cool, but have you tried Fire Emblem? For those unfamiliar, Fire Emblem is a fantasy tactical role-playing series. It's like chess, except your pieces are hot anime people and Gilbert. Your crew talks to each other between battles. In the series, there's a recurring mechanic called supports. While it works slightly differently in each game, in general, when two compatible characters fight near each other, they grow closer to each other, fight better, and have special conversations. First, they'll be like, "Fuck you! Fuck you!" And then they'll be like, you know what, this guy ain't so bad. Gain a high enough support level, and at the end of the game's story, they might have a paired ending together where they get married and have each other's babies. Given that Ike's only options for paired endings are Soren and Ranulf, two dudes, this is a pretty open and shut case, right? The main character always gets married at the end of each Fire Emblem game. Don't believe me? Well, Fire Emblem 1, Black Dragon White Sword, Marth Mary Sheeta, Fire Emblem 2, Gaiden, All Mary Celica, Fire Emblem 3, Mystery Emblem, a direct sequel to Fire Emblem 1, where you play as married Marth who is married to married Sheeta. Fire Emblem 4, Holy Genealogy War, a game with two parts. In part 1, the player harnesses the power of strategic eugenics to marry all of your characters, and then you play as all their kids in part 2. During the first half, the main character, Sigurd, meets a mysterious forest lady that has him acting unwise, so he marries her, and in the second half you play as their son, Seliph. There's also some real messed up stuff in FE4, and y'all, I don't think this game's gonna get a remake. Not because of all the, grape, or the grincest, or the griled murder. It's because this game is boring. Genealogy is boring. Yeah, I said it. 10 turns of just movement before something happens. FE5, Thracia 7-Up, takes place during the beginning of the second half of FE4, so the ending to FE5 is the rest of FE4. FE6, Boundblade. Roy potentially gets married to one of several women, passing on his terrible stats. It's the true start of what will eventually be known as the Fire Emblem harems. FE7, Blaze It Blade, a prequel to FE6. Eliwood and Lynn and Hector get married. Possibly to each other? No, sadly not a throuple. FE8, Sacred Rocks, the brother-sister duo Erica and Ephraim get married at the end. No, not to each other. Disgusting. FE9 and FE10, those are Ike's games, we'll get back to those. FE11, Dragon's Shadows, a remake of 1, pre-married Marth. FE12, Mystery Again, is a remake of 3, post-married Marth. FE13, Wake Up. Chrom gets married and gives birth to Lucina. I mean, his wife gives birth to Lucina, I assume? FE12 and 13 also had custom avatar characters. You can marry anyone in the game, because it's you! You're in the game! As long as you're straight and white. Speaking of, between Fire Emblems 13 and 14, the silly life sim game Tomodachi Life came out on 3DS. Your Miis, representations of yourself, can get in relationships in that game, but they had to be same-sex ones, even if you in real life wouldn't do that. People rightfully complained, and in a rare move, Nintendo actually apologized, and said that they would do more in the future to be more inclusive in their game design. Which brings us to Fire Emblem 14, Fates, where your custom character is the main character. You could marry anyone in the roster, including your siblings? Wait, what the? And there are even gay options! Like, 2 of them. And before you go handing out your Pride medals to Fates, there was also a weird scene where your character would secretly drug one of your units into not finding women attractive, a scene that is extremely reminiscent of conversion therapy. What the fuck, Fire Emblem? You can make a game without this! Fire Emblem 15, Shadow Valentines, remake of 2. Fire Emblem 16, Treehouse. This game has more bisexuals than the leather jacket booth at the AO3 Writers Convention. You got your avatar character, one of the lords, a bunch of the other playable characters, Regardless of the gender, in some routes you can marry the dummy thick pope who's simultaneously your grandmother and your daughter? Look, Fire Emblem's a weird game. Plus there are a lot of, are they? Pairings too. But look, I didn't run through all that just to flex my Fire Emblem knowledge and pad this video's runtime. Okay, it wasn't just for that. It was to establish that from the series' inception and throughout its history, paired endings, supports, and your units growing closer is endemic to the series' identity. On top of the main characters, there's also many side characters you recruit who also have their own support conversations and paired endings. So what happened in Ike's games? Well, at the end of the first one, Path of Radiance, since there's a sequel that takes place 2 years later, the game kinda ends with like a high school yearbook signing session. There is a scene that has Ike and Alencia, the female protagonist, holding hands and greeting the crowd after defeating local angry man. One could reasonably assume from this scene, and since Path of Radiance is a pretty straightforward fantasy story, that they get together at the end. But in the sequel Radiant Dawn, it's kind of vague what happens between the two games, but whatever it was, Ike has left her. In both games, there's multiple scenes of women flirting with Ike, and he just ignores it or feels uncomfortable by it. You could make the argument that Ike's not gonna let a little Amussy or Elin Sissy distract him from his Sigma grind set, or you could say that they're all barking up the wrong tree. Radiant Dawn is a non-formulaic Fire Emblem game, in that your roster changes frequently. One chapter you'll be playing as the A team, next chapter you'll be in control of the B team, the next chapter, oh god, no! As a result, there aren't many traditional support conversations that trigger by playing the game, and instead you see interactions between your characters through the info conversations. However, if you do support certain units, there are still a handful of possible paired endings. Mist and Boyd, Alencia and Jeffrey, Astrid and No! No! Even the other main character of Radiant Dawn, Micaiah, gets her own paired ending where she gets married. Don't look up their ages. I mean, you could say that Micaiah forfeited her protagonist card when she dumped oil on her sister and her army and tried to light them on fire. Jesus Christ. But even with these lack of traditional supports, the game still goes out of its way to give Ike 2 paired ending options with one of 2 dudes. In these endings, the game does not explicitly say, they got married and did tons of gay, because that's not how people write. But it does say that they went on a journey together and were never seen again. And I think in our traditionally heteronormative media, it's easy to assume that a character is defaulted to straight unless explicitly stated otherwise. Ike doesn't show up and say, hello, my name is Ike, I fight for my friends and oh boy, especially the male ones, because again, that's not how people write. Ike doesn't act like an effeminate gay stereotype either, like, for example, I don't know, Sylvando from Dragon Quest. Nor does his sexuality have any sort of story focus or plot relevance, like it is for Kanji from Persona 4. Ike is written to be a character focused on his mission since he's a mercenary and hero first before anything else. And I mean, I could go through every one of Ike's, Soren's, and Ranulph's conversations, analyzing all their intimate moments and mildly flirtatious dialogue, talk about how Ike jumps in front of a punch for Ranulph, and Soren says, the only place for me is by your side, and Ike says, Ranulph, I want you with me, or how there's a secret conversation where Ike and Soren embrace right before the final chapter, and look for hidden subtext that may or may not be there. And while these overtones may not be intentional, the game's writing didn't exactly go out of its way to avoid it either. Plus there's the officially released Tellius Memorial books and drama CDs which are, well, more deliberate about the closeness of these characters. Radiant Dawn was also a pretty progressive game for 2007. It has Heather, the first lesbian in the series, well, canonical lesbian anyways, and had Kaiza, who has a crush on Ranulph, plus uses they-them pronouns when they brought them back in the mobile game. Plus the entire plot to Radiant Dawn was defeat racism. And of course, it's entirely possible that Ike's endings are just bros being bros, going on a bros trip, 5 feet apart, or it's entirely possible that Ike could be bi or ace or pan. However, even modern Fire Emblem games don't explicitly say the 2 characters hooked up when there's a same-sex ending. They spend all of their days together. They were always at each other's side. Who knows what they did in their private moments? I think what you mean is they was fucking. Over time, especially in the last 2 decades, the world has become more accepting of non-hetero relationships, both in media and in the real world. But even as general acceptance grows, there's also going to be an unfortunate amount of pushback from fringe amounts of shitty people. Even as I'm writing this video, this week Japanese courts upheld a same-sex marriage ban. Happy Pride Month? But in 2007, how would players react and how would parents react if the ending of Radiant Dawn flat out said, oh, by the way, you've been playing as a gay guy this whole time? Stupid ass people get mad about that kind of stuff today. The counter-argument that came 6 years later, in a different game. There's only one legitimate piece of evidence against this. Priam, the personification of the straight agenda. For context, Fire Emblem Awakening has 23 optional bonus chapters called paralogs. The first 17 of them were side quests, most of them involving recruiting your future adult kids who've traveled back in time to prevent the apocalypse, and then kinda forgot to. Great writing. Paralogs 18 through 22 are questionably canon missions you download from the internet, where you recruit every major villain that you already killed, plus the most impactful death in the story. But yeah, they're fine now.
Somehow
Gangrel and Walmart and Emerin and Yenfei and Aversa
returned.
In the final paralogue, after the string of ones that don't really make sense, you face off in a big battle against Priam, who is said to be descendant from the Radiant hero Ike. That proves it, right? If Ike has descendants, then at some point, Ike, a man presumably with no uterus, fathered a child who had children, who goes on to eventually give birth to Priam. Well, I don't buy it. I will now present counter-arguments to the counter-argument. Option 1. Priam is an imposter. Amogus. First, it's worth noting that appearance and personality-wise, these characters are not at all similar, other than the blue hair that is a different shade of blue. But that's neither here nor there. Obviously, children can differ from their parents. But skills in Awakening are passed on genetically. That's why partway through the game, you replace your longtime roster with fresh recruits like it's college basketball, because they inherited the best skills from their parents. Ike's signature skill is Aether, and Priam has Sol and Luna, the two halves of Aether that you can learn through leveling up, but not Aether itself, which is a skill in the game. The parents would want to pass on Aether. It's the best skill in the game. You can literally recruit Ike in Awakening, and even here, he has Aether. A little sus. Maybe people just said Priam vaguely resembles the Radiant hero from Legend who was also good at fighting, so Priam just went along with it to boost his clout. Priam doesn't actually say he's Ike's descendant himself, in neither his paralogue nor his support conversations. Option 2. Priam is almost telling the truth? Maybe Priam could be the great ×8 grandson of Mist, Ike's sister. She can marry Boyd at the end of Radiant Dawn. Get cucked, Rolf! So that would make Priam at least share Ike's bloodline. Ike and Mist's mom Elena had blue hair, that's how he got the gene. Or, in a story setting with dragons and magic and time traveling and dimension hopping babies, I don't think we can completely rule out the use of a magical surrogate, or possibly even. I don't like this option because even in the mobile game, Ike and Priam meet and have 4 conversations and they don't bring up Priam's ancestry at all, almost as if he wanted to hide it. They talk about their sword, Ragnall, 4 times, but he uses Ike's sword, that's evidence, right? Ike doesn't even use Ike's sword. In Path of Radiance, he uses Ragnall for 2.5 chapters, then gives it back. He's regifted it later in Radiant Dawn, but he probably would have given it back again. Ragnall is not like some ancestral sword or anything. In Path of Radiance, Ike literally picks it up off screen after his dad forgot the weapon triangle. Also, Altina uses it, no relation. God, if I could remember pickup lines as well as I could remember Fire Emblem lore, I'd be drowning in the puss. Wait. Drowning? Priam being here makes no sense at all! Fire Emblem games are implied to take place in their own world unless otherwise stated. In Ike's games, the entire planet was flooded except for the continent of Tellius, killing everyone. It's not like a minor event, it's the inciting incident for the entire plot. So in order for this to make sense, the floodwaters recede, Ike sails off and settles down somewhere, and then a new civilization gets founded, and then Marth's games happen, then 1,000 years pass, then Awakening happens, and in all that time, Priam's ancestors are like, oh yeah, we're definitely Ike's descendants. Look, we have his sword, it's a 2-range weapon. You just throw it. Or maybe they could have hopped through dimensions like the Einher Yard. No! This is too confusing! Option 3, what really happened? Awakening might be our last Fire Emblem game. LOL. People know Marth from Smash Brothers. This game stars Marth's descendants. People know Ike from Smash Brothers. Let's include a character who's Ike's descendant. And they didn't think about it any more than that. Priam is just a bonus Easter egg at best. Final thoughts. The 10-second version of this video is, while Ike is not explicitly said to be gay in his games, and is not necessarily portrayed how gay characters traditionally are in media, there is ample evidence to say that this is a 100% valid reading of the character. Is it canon? I don't know, but is it valid? Absolutely. As for me, I am 100% gay Ike believer. Anyways, that's all I got. I've had recent issues with people commenting without watching the video, so we're bringing back the code words. Include the word, I don't know, eggplant in your comment to prove you made it all the way through the whole video. And as always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed it. And that's it, video's over.